On a bone-chilling winter night deep in the Alaskan wilderness, Warren Pierce was preparing for another long evening alone in his remote log cabin. As someone who had spent most of his life in the unforgiving climate of the North, Warren was no stranger to the harshness of nature. But nothing in all his years of solitude could have prepared him for what he found on his porch that night. He first heard it, a strange, soft scratching at the front door, followed by low, mournful whimpers that cut through the howl of the wind. At first, he assumed it might be a stray dog or a feral animal seeking warmth, but when he peeked through the frost-covered window, his breath caught in his throat. 2 wolves, thin, frost-covered, and clearly on the brink of collapse, stood there, staring at his door. There was no aggression in their eyes, only desperation. Warren hesitated. Opening his home to wild predators went against every survival instinct he'd cultivated over the years. But something in their posture, trembling limbs, sunken eyes, ragged breaths, told him they weren't there to hunt. They were simply trying to survive. With caution and compassion battling in his chest, he slowly opened the door. The wolves stepped forward tentatively, as if afraid the offer of refuge would vanish. Their matted fur was clumped with snow, and one of them, smaller than the other, moved with a pronounced limp. The larger wolf, bearing a visible scar across its muzzle, stayed close to its companion, a silent guardian. As they crossed the threshold into the warmth of the cabin, Warren knew he was taking a risk. But it was one he couldn't ignore. The heat from the fire seemed to take immediate effect. The wolves shivered as the warmth soaked into their frozen bodies. They didn't attack or growl. Instead, they slowly explored the room with cautious curiosity. Warren kept his distance, observing every twitch of muscle, every glance in his direction. He had seen wild animals before, but these two carried something different: trust, fear, and exhaustion. Noticing the smaller wolf's worsening limp, Warren fetched some leftover meat from his pantry and laid it on the floor. They devoured it in seconds. It broke his heart a little, the way they ate with urgency, not greed. Afterward, they lay near the hearth, curling their bodies close together for warmth. Warren, still in disbelief, watched them as he sat quietly by the fire, flipping through an old book that now held none of his attention. Through the night, the wolves stirred but made no attempts to cause trouble. At one point, the larger one whimpered in its sleep, paws twitching like it was running in a dream. Warren felt a strange urge to reach out, to comfort, but he held back. The boundaries between man and wild still held, fragile as they were. By morning, the snow had stopped. The cabin was bathed in a dull gray light filtering through icy windows. Warren checked on the wolves and noticed the smaller one's leg was worse, swollen, possibly frostbitten. Slowly, he approached. The injured wolf tensed but didn't lash out. He gently examined the leg and decided to try treating it as best as he could. With nothing more than a basic first aid kit, Warren cleaned the wound, applied ointment, and wrapped the limb with gauze. It wasn't much, but it was something. The larger wolf never took its eyes off him, growling softly whenever he made sudden moves. But it didn't interfere, perhaps sensing his good intentions. Food supplies were running low, and Warren knew he couldn't feed 2 full-grown wolves indefinitely. He bundled up and ventured out to gather firewood and scout for food. As he walked through the snow-covered terrain, he couldn't shake the image of the wolves at his door, battered and beaten by the wild. Something in him had shifted. He wasn't just surviving the winter anymore. He was helping others survive too. When he returned, the wolves were just as he'd left them, resting near the fire. The smaller one seemed a little more alert, licking its bandaged leg. Warren offered them another small meal. As they ate, he wondered what would come next. How long could he keep them here? And what if their pack came looking? That night, as the wind picked up again, the cabin became a quiet haven of warmth and unlikely companionship. Warren couldn't bring himself to contact authorities just yet. He feared they might remove the wolves, or worse. Deep down, he hoped they would recover and return to the wild on their own. But fate had other plans. At dawn, Warren woke to a low growl coming from the far corner of the room. The larger wolf stood alert, ears flat, eyes locked on the front door. Warren's pulse quickened. Something was outside. Carefully, he peered through the window and spotted a figure, not an animal, but a person, moving near the tree line. He stepped outside, cautiously following the fresh footprints in the snow. As he rounded the side of the cabin, a voice startled him. "Are they inside?" a woman asked. She was bundled in a heavy parka, her eyes sharp and full of urgency. Warren hesitated. "Who are you?" She revealed that she was tracking the wolves, part of a wildlife rehabilitation group. The injured one, she explained, had gone missing with her sibling during a blizzard. Their team had feared the worst until she picked up the trail leading here. Warren's guard rose again. "Tracking them for what? Research or removal?" "I'm trying to help," she said firmly. "We've been monitoring this pair for months. That one's injured. If they stay out here much longer, they won't make it." Her name was Kara, and she offered to show him credentials and explain everything inside. Warren, still wary but hopeful, led her into the cabin. The larger wolf immediately placed itself between her and the injured one, teeth slightly bared. But Kara crouched, speaking softly, extending her hands to show she meant no harm. To Warren's surprise, the wolves seemed to recognize her, or at least her scent. They relaxed slightly, their tension easing as Kara knelt to examine the bandaged leg. "You did a good job," she said, looking at Warren with real appreciation. "You may have saved her." Kara confirmed that the wolves had once belonged to a pack of 6. After the blizzard, only these two had been found alive. Their bond was more than survival. It was familial. They were likely siblings, and the larger one had been protecting the injured female all along. Warren felt a heavy mix of relief and sadness. He knew what was coming. Kara would need to take them back to her facility for treatment, and eventually return them to the wild. "You're going to take them?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Just until she's healed. Then we'll release them back to their territory." Warren looked at the wolves and nodded slowly. "It's the right thing to do." That evening, they made preparations. Warren offered the use of his snowmobile to transport the wolves to a rendezvous point 3 miles away, where Kara's team would be waiting. They constructed a makeshift sled, lined it with blankets, and agreed to let the wolves rest one more night before the journey. Over the fire, Kara and Warren talked about the wolves, about loneliness, and about how easily unexpected connections could change your life. Warren admitted something he hadn't said aloud, that maybe he needed the wolves as much as they needed him. By morning, the winds had calmed. Kara managed to radio her team. Help was on the way. The final step was getting the wolves onto the sled. Gently, they lifted the injured one, who whimpered but didn't fight. The larger wolf followed on its own, eyes flicking protectively between the humans and its sibling. As they set off into the snow-covered wilderness, Warren felt a strange emptiness settle in his chest, but also a quiet pride. He had done something that mattered. Something wild had found refuge with him, and in turn, reminded him of his own humanity. Some bonds are brief but powerful. And sometimes, kindness in the coldest moments can change more than just a life. It can rewrite the story of what it means to be truly alive.